We've got another instance of horrific police brutality, totally unnecessary treatment. We're gonna show you just a little bit of it right now, but this is your warning that it's pretty dark stuff.
Put your hands up. Hands up.
There you see, get your hands up. Cop has his gun pulled on a family in the car there. We have something that's so common. A family goes to a dollar store. And then the 4-year-old girl apparently took a Barbie or something. Family didn't know. They drive off. The next thing they know, they're being threatened with death by cops who are totally out of control. And so we're gonna show you the full video in just a second, but understand as we get into that, the context, Drayvon Ames and his fiancee, Alicia Harper, say Phoenix police pointed guns at their heads while their 1- and 4-year-old daughters watched. The whole thing started again, as I said, after a trip to the family dollar store and a Barbie in a backpack. And so with that, here is the first part of the video.
Hands up!
Police? Yeah.
It doesn't open. I promise it doesn't open.
You're gonna get shot. Get your hands up. Get out the car. You're gonna get out the
Car right now.
Yes, get out now. Get out the car.
All right, okay, hands up.
You're empty.
You recording it? Yeah, I'm recording it.
Put your hands up. I don't give a. Put your hands up. Hands up.
So of course there we've cleaned up the language with some bleeping, but I think you get the general idea. This had been 2 cops yelling at a person who apparently could not get out of the car because they had a child on their lap, the door wouldn't open, something like that, that they were going to put a cap in her head. They were gonna murder someone because they have a report that a Barbie was stolen.
One of the quotes is, "You're going to effing get shot." Now, of all the different police brutality and inappropriate actions that we have covered, this is among the most insane. And we've shown you unarmed people getting shot for almost no reason at all. So why does this rank up near the top? Do any of you have kids? You know what 4-year-olds do? They grab stuff because they don't know, because they're 4. They're like, oh, that's a cool car. That's a cool Barbie. I like Barbies. I like cars. And so they grab it, and sometimes they don't know they're not supposed to take it. And so you got to call, because sometimes cops show up and they hear shots fired, right? They don't hear it, but that's what the report was, like a story we did yesterday. Now in that story, the shots weren't fired and they went ballistic anyway. But in this case, the report is a 4-year-old took a Barbie, and you come in with guns raised, talking about how you're gonna shoot people, her parents in the head. I can't comprehend that unless they're all on steroids or some sort of drugs, or the training in Phoenix is, if you see anything, you see a jaywalker, immediately threaten to murder them. What on God's green earth would justify threatening to kill the parents of a 4-year-old who took a Barbie? Even if it was what? Malicious? What, the 4-year-old did it maliciously? That's why you threatened to murder her parents? Look, if you can't understand there's something deeply wrong with policing in this country, you're trying super hard not to see it. Because I guess you think, well, they wouldn't do that to me. I don't know why you think that. There's probably a good reason why you think that they wouldn't do it to you. And you really, really don't mind and sometimes enjoy that they do it to other people.
I'm just gonna call a thing a thing. It's definitely racism. And when I saw that video, it reawakened this PTSD from watching Philando Castile get gunned down in front of his family. And it really kills me all the more when I hear a progressive say, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. What is happening to this country? This was going on long before Trump went into office. This, the body cams, the apps that allow us to witness and observe these atrocities, atrocities may be new, but the racism most certainly is not new. And America has a long-standing history of anti-Blackness and racism. In fact, when we look at the origins of law enforcement, they were originally slave catchers. Their job was, they were essentially an assets protection company because slaves were the assets. And so throughout the years, as we continue to develop government and as we continue to establish even local governing, no one has ever addressed the elephant in the room that law enforcement was never on the side of Black people. So when I watch a video and I see several Black people, including children, almost murdered over a 99-cent Barbie doll, they basically put a price and value to the lives of Black people. And so what I would ask people, more importantly, what are you willing to do to get involved? Because I guarantee you that if they come for us in the morning, they'll come for you in the evening.
Yeah.
And how many more times do we have to see Black brains splattered all across our social media feed before our elected officials speak up? We're talking about so many issues on the presidential stage this election. I want to know what they plan to do about police corruption and police brutality, because this is not just an isolated incident. This is an instance of systemic violence, and it's going to continue to thrive until we intervene.
Yeah, we, as you sort of alluded to, we show videos like this all the time. I mean, a tiny, tiny fraction of the videos we could, and that's only a tiny, tiny fraction of the instances that aren't taped. But I just get so depressed seeing them sometimes, because no matter how horrible they are, a significant chunk of the country, 20 or 30 or 40 or 50%, don't think that there's any problem with the cops. Don't think that there's any racism.
They ask the question, what did they do? They must have done something.
Actually,
so basically, it goes back to this idea that whenever we see violence taking place against African Americans, we ask ourselves, what have they done? Because there's always this sense of suspicion that follows us. Simply for existing. You know, you see some of the memes about Backyard Becky or Barbecue Becky, and these white women who will call law enforcement on children who are just selling lemonade on a hot day. It really speaks to the history of America and how we see communities of color.
And it's as you said, it's 100% race. If I had gone into that dollar store and kidnapped the manager, they wouldn't have yelled at me that way.
You can pull out the cop's gun out of his holster and they wouldn't have reacted that way.
They got Dylan Roof Burger King after he slaughtered people. But that cop was yelling at them. I've never been as angry as that cop was in my entire life. I've been in actual fights. I've been jumped. I've seen family members die. I've never been as mad as that cop was about that Barbie. And I tweeted out that video and someone responded, they weren't threatening to shoot the people because of the Barbie. They were threatening to shoot because they wouldn't get out. Stop
they couldn't
lying.
open the door.
Exactly, and
the door
when I
was
saw
stuck.
that, I just thought, like, you can't have a police state, you can't have a dictatorship without a significant chunk of the country thinking the way that person responded to me on Twitter. And it's so sad to know that there is nothing that's gonna break through their minds on this.
It's cognitive dissonance.
Do you really think that the 4-year-old concocted a scheme where she would take the 99-cent Barbie, and then when the cops came, her parents would ambush the cops, pretending that the door doesn't open, and then pull out AR-15s and kill the cops? Does anyone in their right mind believe that that is a plausible scenario? Their lives were in not 1% of 1% danger, and if you think it was, there's something wrong with you. That you live in this weird, racist, fearful state where you're like, oh my God, Black people, I'm so scared. Like there's something wrong with you.
And that's usually their argument when they murder us, that they're afraid. They didn't look afraid to me. And there's this expectation that we're supposed to meet an ambush with calmness, patience. We're supposed to have a lowered voice. There was even, when the gentleman was up against the car, the cop kicked his legs as to provoke him. And so I think this goes back to this idea that if you aren't gonna respond to any of the violence you're seeing, all of this trauma porn that we're broadcasting 24/7, we're gonna continue to press buttons and see what we can get away with until the Black community responds.
Yeah, so lastly on this, I just wanna back up what Ashley said. So just last night I had Tom Hartman on the third hour of the Young Turks. It's called The Conversation. Go to tyt.com and you can see the interview under The Conversation. And he wrote a whole book about the Second Amendment. In the North, the militia was basically police enforcement and could be called up for wars. In the South, they were just the slave patrols. That's what the militia was. And then they became the cops. The slave patrol became the cops. And so that is the origins of that, at least in that region of the country. And if you're wondering why, like for example, LAPD, even in liberal, so-called liberal cities like Los Angeles, why do they have some of the worst police? They actually brought in cops from Alabama to be the police force in LA. And then if you read any of the history of that, they became basically the largest gang in LA and used their badges and guns to rob people, steal, and run their criminal activities. So now that doesn't mean every cop did it, but can we all agree, at least on the tape that we just watched, that those guys should be fired? Imagine if your 4-year-old daughter had accidentally put something in her, or even intentionally, she's 4, put something in her backpack and they treated you that way, your family that way, and they almost killed you. Wouldn't you want them fired for having the worst decision making that we could ever imagine? And they have a gun and a badge. And if they shoot and kill someone, they will almost certainly get away with it. Jesus, if your doctor had that kind of bad decision making, you'd sue him. So the cops are supposed to represent us. They're supposed to work for us. Those guys should definitely be fired, and their manager, very likely, who trained them and told them to do that, should also be fired. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.